The library study room. I was in my junior year at Westlake University and had developed a habit of studying late at the campus library. There was this one study room on the fourth floor that I particularly liked because it was tucked away in a corner where hardly anyone went. The fourth floor was rumored to have been a psychiatric ward decades ago before the building was converted into a library, but I never put much stock in those stories. It was just campus folklore, the kind that every college seems to have. The room itself was small but comfortable, just a table, 4 chairs, and walls made of frosted glass that let in light from the hallway but still offered privacy. What I liked most was the silence. The thick carpet absorbed all sound, creating this perfect bubble for concentration. Sometimes I'd be there until 3 a.m., and it never bothered me. In fact, I preferred it when the library was nearly empty. One night around 1 a.m., I was deep into my economics textbook when I heard a light tapping on the glass window of the study room. It wasn't aggressive, just a gentle tap tap tap, like someone trying to politely get my attention. I looked up, expecting to see another student, but no one was there. The hallway was empty, illuminated only by the dim emergency lighting that stayed on after hours. I shrugged it off and went back to my notes. Economics wasn't my strongest subject, and I had an exam the next day that I couldn't afford to fail. A few minutes later, I heard it again, a bit louder this time. Tap, tap, tap. Again, I looked up, and again, no one was there. Just the empty hallway and the rows of bookshelves beyond, barely visible in the low light. I was starting to get irritated, thinking someone was messing with me. Maybe it was Jake from my dorm. He knew I studied here and had a habit of pulling stupid pranks. I got up and opened the door, peering down both sides of the hallway. Empty. The entire floor seemed deserted, which wasn't unusual for that time of night. The air felt colder in the hallway than in my study room, and I caught a faint smell like old pennies, metallic and stale. Very funny, I called out, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the silence. I've got an exam tomorrow, so knock it off. No response. Just the soft hum of the building's ventilation system. When I sat back down, I noticed something odd on the window, a faint handprint that wasn't there before, as if someone had pressed their palm against the glass. What disturbed me most was that it was too high up for anyone to reach without a ladder. I stood up and examined it closer. It wasn't just one handprint, but several, overlapping. Some smaller than others, like children's hands. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they were old prints that I was just now noticing because of how the hallway light hit the glass. But deep down, I knew they were new. I could see the moisture slowly evaporating from them, leaving behind the ghostly outlines. I decided it was time to leave. As I packed up my things, the lights in the study room flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. The emergency lights in the hallway were still on, creating an eerie glow through the frosted glass. As I fumbled with my backpack in the dark, I heard a scratching sound coming from the ceiling above me. It started faint like nails on paper but grew louder, more desperate. I pointed my phone flashlight upward, scanning the ceiling tiles, but saw nothing unusual. Yet the scratching continued, moving from one side of the room to the other, directly above my head. I froze, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The scratching turned into a slow, dragging noise, like something heavy being pulled across the ceiling tiles. Then came a whisper, so close it could have been right next to my ear. Stay longer. The voice was raspy, neither male nor female, with a wet quality to it that made my skin crawl. I whipped around, but there was no one there, just me in the dark room with my phone's small circle of light. "Who's there?" I demanded, trying to sound brave but hearing the tremor in my voice. The only response was a soft giggle from the corner of the room, the corner where no one was standing. I bolted out of there, nearly tripping over myself, leaving half my study materials behind. As I ran through the hallway toward the stairs, I could swear I heard footsteps behind me, but they weren't quite right. They sounded wet, like someone walking with soaked shoes. Slap, slap, slap against the carpet. I didn't look back, not even once. I burst through the stairwell door and took the steps two at a time, almost falling several times. When I reached the main floor, I was gasping for breath, and the night librarian gave me a strange look but didn't say anything. I never studied on the fourth floor again. A week later, I overheard a librarian mention that the study room I had been using was going to be permanently closed. When I asked why, she looked uncomfortable and said there had been incidents. She wouldn't elaborate further, but I noticed she wouldn't look at the ceiling when she spoke about it. Out of curiosity, I did some research on the library's history. The fourth floor had indeed been part of a psychiatric facility in the 1950s. What the campus rumors didn't mention was that several patients had died there by suicide. Their names were redacted in the old newspaper articles I found, but one detail stood out. All three had been found in the same room, the room that would later become my favorite study spot. Months later, I ran into Jake, the friend I initially suspected of the prank. When I told him what happened, his face went pale. He'd had a similar experience in that same study room the previous year, the tapping, the whispers, the feeling of being watched. But what chilled me to the bone was what he said next. Did you ever notice the ceiling tiles? How one of them was a slightly different color than the rest? I hadn't, but he explained that he'd once stood on a chair and pushed up that tile out of curiosity. Behind it, scratched into the concrete ceiling, were dozens of handprints and a single sentence: "They won't let us leave." The switched roommate. I moved into Oakridge Hall my freshman year and was assigned a roommate named Max. From the beginning, Max was weird, but in a harmless way. He had strange sleeping habits, often staying up until 4 a.m. staring at his computer screen, the blue light illuminating his expressionless face in the darkness. He rarely spoke unless spoken to, and when he did, his responses were brief and functional. But we got along fine, mainly because we stayed out of each other's way. Our dorm room was typical 2 beds, 2 desks, 2 dressers, and a shared bathroom. Max kept his side meticulously organized, almost sterile. No posters, no photos, just textbooks arranged by size and a laptop. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night to find him sitting perfectly still, staring at his screen with headphones on. I'd ask him what he was watching the next morning, and he'd just say research without elaborating. About 2 months into the semester, I went home for a long weekend Thursday through Monday for my sister's birthday. When I returned on Monday evening, Max greeted me with a smile and asked how my trip was. "Hey, welcome back. How was your sister's birthday?" This was unusual because Max never initiated conversations, and I couldn't remember ever telling him why I was going home. But I brushed it off, thinking maybe he was just in a good mood or I had mentioned it in passing. "It was good, thanks," I replied, setting down my duffel bag. Max nodded enthusiastically, another out-of-character gesture. His eyes seemed different somehow, more present. That night, I noticed other small differences. Max had rearranged his desk, moving his laptop to the center instead of the left side where he always kept it. He was wearing a watch I'd never seen before, a chunky digital thing with a red display. Most noticeably, he went to bed at 10 p.m. instead of his usual 4 a.m., pulling his covers up to his chin and saying, "Night, buddy. Sleep tight." The strangest part was that he kept calling me buddy and pal, terms he'd never used before. The Max I knew barely acknowledged my existence most days. I lay awake for hours that night, listening to Max's breathing. It wasn't the same quiet, barely there breathing I was used to. This was deeper, almost theatrical, like someone imitating sleep. The next morning, I ran into Max's friend Tyler in the hallway. Tyler was one of the few people Max actually hung out with. They were in the same computer science program. I mentioned how different Max seemed lately, and Tyler looked at me like I was crazy. "What are you talking about?" Max left for his cousin's wedding on Friday. He's not coming back until tomorrow. A chill ran down my spine, so sudden and intense that I physically shivered. No, that's not possible. He was in our room last night. He's been there all weekend. Tyler frowned and pulled out his phone. Dude, look. He showed me Max's Instagram profile. The most recent post, from just 3 hours earlier, showed Max with his family at what was clearly a wedding reception. The geotag placed him in Denver, Colorado, over 1,000 miles away. Maybe he came back early? I suggested weakly, though I knew it made no sense. Tyler shook his head and scrolled through Max's stories. He's been posting all weekend. Look, here's him on the plane Friday. Here's the rehearsal dinner Saturday. Each photo showed timestamps and locations. There was no way he could have been in our dorm. I calmly asked Tyler if he was absolutely sure, and he pulled up a video Max had sent him that morning. Max was clearly at a hotel breakfast buffet, his cousin visible in the background. The video was timestamped 7:43 a.m. just 2 hours ago. I went back to my room, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. The person I thought was Max was sitting at his desk, typing away on his laptop, the same laptop Max never let anyone touch. He turned to me and smiled the same smile as last night, but now it seemed off, too wide, too forced. His teeth looked different too, slightly crooked in places where I remembered Max's being straight. "Everything okay, pal?" he asked, his voice slightly different now that I was really listening. Max had a barely noticeable lisp that this person didn't. I mumbled something about forgetting a textbook and left immediately, my legs trembling as I walked away. I spent the day avoiding my room, sitting in the library and trying to figure out what to do. Campus security wouldn't believe me the guy had Max's ID, knew all his stuff, and was literally living in his space. Who would believe me? I'd sound insane. I texted the real Max, trying to sound casual. "Hey, when are you getting back from Denver?" 10 minutes later, he replied, "Flight lands at 8:30 tonight, back on campus by 10 probably." That evening, I got another text from Max saying his flight had landed and he'd be back on campus in an hour. I waited in the common room, jumping at every sound until I saw him walk in, rolling a small suitcase behind him. The real Max I was certain of it. Without saying anything about my suspicions, I led him to our room. When we opened the door, there was no one there. Max's side of the room was exactly how he left it before the weekend, with no sign that anyone had been there. Max tossed his backpack on his bed. "Man, I'm beat. Weddings are exhausting." I was about to tell him everything when I noticed something on my pillow, a folded piece of paper that definitely wasn't there when I left that morning. With shaking hands, I unfolded it. Written in neat, unfamiliar handwriting were the words, "See you soon, buddy." The handwriting didn't match Max's messy scrawl at all. I showed it to Max, who looked as confused as I felt. "Is this some kind of joke?" he asked. We reported it to campus security that night. They reviewed the building's security footage from the entire weekend. They found nothing. No stranger entering our room, no one leaving it except for me. According to the cameras, no one had been in our room all weekend. The officer suggested that maybe I had dreamed the whole thing, or that a friend was playing a prank. But I knew what I saw, what I talked to. Whatever had been in our room wasn't human. No human could enter and leave a locked building without appearing on any cameras. I switched dorms the next day, making up an excuse about needing to be closer to my classes. Max thought I was overreacting, but he didn't fight it. 3 weeks later, he texted me in the middle of the night. "I think someone's been in my room while I was sleeping. My stuff is moved around. And I keep having dreams about someone sitting at my desk watching me." I never told him what I thought it was. Some things are better left unsaid, but I still check the faces of people I pass on campus very carefully, especially when they smile at me and call me buddy. The basement laundry room. My sophomore year, I lived in Blackwell Hall, one of the oldest dorms on campus. The 5-story brick building dated back to the 1920s and had that distinct mix of grandeur and decay that comes with age. High ceilings, ornate woodwork, and ancient plumbing that clanked and groaned at all hours of the night. The building had this creepy basement laundry room that everyone hated using. It wasn't just inconvenient, there was something fundamentally unsettling about it. The lighting was poor, just a few flickering fluorescent tubes that cast everything in a sickly yellow glow. The machines were ancient, with rusty corners and missing buttons. The whole place smelled faintly of mildew and something else. I could never quite identify something metallic and unpleasant. But the worst part was that you needed to go through a long, narrow hallway to reach it. This hallway had originally been used for storage, so it was lined with these small, padlocked closets with ancient wooden doors. Most were empty now, but a few still contained old equipment or forgotten belongings from decades past. For some reason, the motion sensor lights in that hallway only worked about half the time, meaning you often had to walk through complete darkness to reach the laundry room. Most students avoided doing laundry at night because of this. There were rumors of course stories about people hearing whispers in the hallway or feeling hands grab at their clothes. I never believed any of that, at least not until what happened to me. One night around midnight, I realized I'd run out of clean clothes for my job interview the next day. My one decent shirt was crumpled in my laundry bag, and I needed it desperately. Despite my reluctance, I gathered my laundry and headed down to the basement. It was late enough that the common areas were deserted, and the old elevator groaned ominously as it carried me down. The hallway was dark when I entered, and as expected, the motion sensors failed to detect me. I used my phone flashlight to guide my way, trying to ignore how the narrow beam created more shadows than it dispelled. The storage closets looked like black holes in the walls, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something might reach out from one of them as I passed. As I approached the laundry room, I heard the distinct sound of one of the washing machines running, the rhythmic sloshing of water and the mechanical hum of the motor. I thought it was strange that someone else would be doing laundry so late, but I was also relieved I wouldn't be alone down there. When I pushed open the heavy metal door, I found the laundry room empty, though one washing machine, the one farthest from the door, was indeed running. I shrugged, figuring someone had started their load and going back upstairs, unwilling to wait in this depressing room. I couldn't blame them. I loaded my clothes into another machine and sat on a bench to wait, scrolling through my phone. The service was spotty in the basement, so I was mostly just looking at cached social media posts I'd already seen. The rhythmic sound of the other washing machine was almost comforting in its normality. About 10 minutes later, the running washing machine stopped with a loud buzz that made me jump. I glanced up, expecting to see someone come in to transfer their laundry to a dryer, but nobody came. After a few minutes of silence, I walked over and opened the machine, thinking I'd do whoever it was a favor by moving their clothes to a dryer. The machine was completely empty. No clothes, no water, nothing. Yet it had definitely been running. I'd heard it, and the inside was still warm and damp when I touched it. I stood there, confused, when I heard the laundry room door creak open behind me. The hinges always squeaked a high, grating sound that set your teeth on edge. I turned, but there was no one there, just the door, now wide open, revealing the dark hallway beyond. The motion sensor lights should have turned on if someone had walked through, but the hallway remained pitch black. As I stared into the darkness, I heard a soft, shuffling sound coming from the hallway, like something being dragged across the floor. A steady, deliberate noise that was slowly getting closer. Then came a voice, barely above a whisper, but somehow crystal clear. "Thank you for checking on my laundry." The voice was raspy and wet, like someone speaking through a mouthful of liquid. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I grabbed my phone and ran for the door, but as I reached it, The lights in the laundry room went out with a sharp electrical pop. In the darkness, I felt something cold brush against my arm, not like a hand, but more like wet fabric. I screamed and fumbled with my phone to turn the flashlight back on, dropping it twice before I managed to activate it. When the light came on, I nearly dropped my phone again in terror. Written on the inside of the laundry room door, in what looked like wet fingerprints slowly dripping down the metal, were the words, "Don't forget your clothes." I bolted out of there and ran all the way back to my room, not stopping even when I heard that shuffling sound following me up the stairs. I slammed my door shut and pushed my desk against it, spending the rest of the night with all the lights on, jumping at every sound. The next morning, I got my friend Chris to go down with me to retrieve my laundry. In the daylight, with another person, I felt ridiculous about how scared I'd been. The words on the door were gone, and everything seemed normal. My clothes were still in the washer where I'd left them, though they'd have to be rewashed now. But as Chris and I were leaving, something caught my eye. Next to the machine that had been running the night before was a small puddle on the floor. When I looked closer, I realized it wasn't water. It was too thick, too dark. It looked more like dirty motor oil, but it had a reddish tint in the harsh fluorescent light. But since that night, whenever I do laundry, I swear I can hear shuffling behind me in that hallway, no matter how brightly lit it is or how many people are around. A soft, dragging sound that keeps pace with me, always just out of sight. A few weeks later, I asked my RA, Michael, about the basement's history, trying to sound casual. "Hey, have you ever heard any weird stories about the laundry room? Any reason people avoid it at night?" He hesitated, looking uncomfortable. "Why do you ask? Did something happen down there?" When I didn't answer, he sighed and lowered his voice. "Look, I'm not supposed to talk about this because the school doesn't want to freak people out, but since you're asking, about 20 years ago, a student was found dead in that laundry room, a girl named Rebecca Winters. What happened to her?" I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. "Officially, the cause was ruled accidental electrocution from a faulty machine, but..." He glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "Some things about the case always seemed suspicious. The medical examiner noted that her clothes were soaking wet, but the machine she was supposedly using was completely dry inside. And there were these weird marks on the door like someone had written something with their fingers, but it was wiped away before police arrived." He paused, looking troubled. "The creepiest part? Security footage showed her entering the laundry room at midnight, but no one else went in or out until she was found the next morning. Yet, 3 different washing machines had been used that night. She was doing laundry alone, late at night, just like you were. I started using the laundromat across the street after that. Even though it cost triple what the dorm machines did, some prices are worth paying. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear that shuffling sound outside my door. And once, just once, when I was half asleep, I thought I heard a raspy whisper, 'I'm still looking for my clothes.' The next morning, I found a small puddle outside my door. The custodian said it was probably just a leak from the pipes, but it wasn't water. It was too thick, too dark, with that same reddish tint I'd seen in the laundry room. I transferred to a different dorm the next semester. I told everyone it was to be closer to my classes, but the real reason was that I couldn't stand being in that building anymore, especially after I learned that Rebecca Winters had lived in my exact room 20 years ago.